All right, so I've been laying in bed for the last couple days, kind of feeling sorry about my situation, which feels like I have full-blown bronchitis. And right before I started this video, I started coughing up phlegm in a dark brown color, which when you're laying in bed and you don't have nothing else to do, and you're too sick to go to work, and you're too sick to work on anything, all you can do is kind of doom scroll on your phone, hoping that you feel better. So that's been my last, few hours yesterday. Probably have to go back to work tomorrow because I don't have the money to go to the doctor, and you can't be out from work for 3 days in a row without a doctor's note. And God only knows that no one has the money to go to the doctor these days or the time. But with that said, there were two terms that I heard today, and both of these terms were terms that I knew could be turned into two separate videos, and I've already worked on those videos kind of like in my melon. But this is the one that I felt like was more proper to use right now, and that's career Banksying, spelled Banksyng. I've never heard about this, but in the way that they were using it in the reference to dating Banksying is that you meet someone that shows a lot of interest in you, and then for some reason, before you know it, you turn around and they're not there anymore. And I think this has happened at nearly every job I've ever had, and I've seen it happen to other people. And the best example I have of this is when I was working at Insight, there was a guy that got hired on with me at the exact same time. So they hired around five or six of us to work for a brand new client. And he was a really bright kid, kind of strange, like everyone else that works in this industry, right? Kind of shy, awkward, depressed, but strangely optimistic about life. Like there's one time he said to me, Millennial Steam, if it wasn't for my cat, I probably wouldn't be here anymore. And I thought that's not something you tell a coworker, but again, this industry's full of weirdos. Lonely weirdos. And the strange part is he had a girlfriend, and I wondered with his personality what was the glue that was keeping them together. He wasn't attractive, he was short, he was fat, he was introverted, but somehow there's someone for everyone out there. But what happened to him is exactly that. The company gave him a laptop, sent him home to work from home, and the rest of us had to stay at work because he was the only person that was trustworthy of working from home. And I thought to myself, that's funny that they chose one person and then they just put him up on a pedestal. He'd have to come in weekly for meetings, and that was just about it. But the second that he said he found a better job, it's like, boom, they cut him off completely. He was back in the office. They made him come into the office every day for the last 2 weeks that he worked there. And no one in management, or none of us, ever spoke to him again. In fact, that was it. Once he said that he was moving on, the company's like, oh, he's not the one anymore. And that happens frequently with people. And it's just like today, I was just thinking about this is that sometimes you go along with someone and then you realize, well, I'm not physically attracted to them. I don't understand why we're still together. And emotionally, I checked out 8 months ago. She just doesn't get it. And it's unfortunate because things like this happen. Sometimes we think that we're just going to be there all the time. And then suddenly you don't want to put forth effort and you leave the relationship. One of my first relationships I ever had, and I got kicked out of the house for this, is like she realized that I was no longer interested. And she's like, why would I let you live here if you're no longer interested in me? And I was just like, sometimes you just stay with something because you got nothing better to do. So, with that said, let's get into today's opening monologue. You ever notice how every job promises growth, but the only thing that grows is your debt and your boss's ego? Capitalism turned work into Tinder. Companies swipe right, on you for the illusion of love, then ghost you the second you don't perform miracles. Dead end jobs aren't the exception anymore. They're the business model. And if you're still waiting for that career ladder surprise, it's just an escalator going down. That's really what it came down to. And Tank Bank made this amazing video years ago when he was still posting. If you guys want to find him, Tank Banks on YouTube, just go to the call center job where they promise you the world. And the second you don't work out, they're showing you the door. And the reality is that, sorry guys, my throat's still really sore. The reality is that they'll promise you everything, and then once they realize that you're just not into it as much as they thought that you were going to be into it, like you just don't, as they put it, you're not a good fit anymore. And this usually happens because they thought they were going to hire you with that 50-year-old man experience. Remember, 20 years of experience, but they're going to pay you like you're still in high school. And then when you act like you're still in high school, the relationship ends. This may take 1 week, it may take 4 weeks. Usually, I can see it in Gen Z within the first 5 days that they get hired. I can see whether or not the attitude is there, the willingness to adapt, the ability, the skill set to adapt to new situations. Because we live in a society where either you sink or swim, and your employer is monitoring you on performance all of the time. You just don't go into work. You work under surveillance that's there whether you see it or not. There is constant surveillance happening all of the time in the workplace because they're always looking to find someone that will work harder for the same amount of money, or preferably less, or even more preferably for nothing, and you just call it an internship or a plantation, whichever you prefer. All right, let's get into talking point number one. So companies don't fire you for being bad at your job. They fire you for not being psychic. Like, sorry, I didn't compress 10 years of experience into 10 business days. I was too busy trying to figure out the Wi-Fi password. This is what I've noticed about all of the people that I've worked with over the past few years, maybe even the last 20 years, is that sometimes people are spending their time trying to become familiar with the job that they may not know very much about. Like for me, when I first started working at McDonald's, I didn't know what the fry-later was. There was a lot of questions. And you have to learn as much as humanly possible per day in order to stay employed. And there are people who have a lot of other problems going on in their lives. In fact, yesterday I was talking to one of my coworkers about this, and he was telling me that there was no way that we could save the guy that was working the register. It was just too much. And I told him, not everyone's life is entirely McDonald's. There are people who are thinking about Susie Rottencrotch. They're thinking about why they're scratching their nuts. They're thinking about how they're going to pay their rent. People have a lot of problems coming into the workplace before you even hire them. That's why your employer expects you to smile all the time, because they know if you took that job at that wage, there's one thing your employer obviously knows about you. You're a desperation worker. Because if you're not a desperation worker, then what are you doing here? And that was the other term that came up, the first term I saw this morning on dating. So there's this phenomena in dating called Shreking. And the second I heard about Shreking, I thought about that is the perfect way of why people in this country, probably all over the planet, are not only Shreking, and this is, I imagine this is just with girls, because girls have a very high standards, but they're realizing that that guy that makes all that money is probably going to be cheating on them. So girls are doing something called Shreking, which is just lowering your beauty expectations or whatever expectations is keeping you from dating. And so she lowers it, lowers her looks, and comes down to, let's say she only dates perfect tens, right? He's got to be chiseled. He's got to have a lot of money, ambitious. He's got to do all these things. But the one thing he's not going to do is he's not going to treat her well. Because this guy, if he's that good looking and has that much money, he's got 10 other girls. But if she comes down to like a number five, like an average guy, I'm a number one on a scale from 1 to 10, by the way. So I'm not even on this scale, but I just saw this. And I saw this dating trend, and I thought, if she comes down to a number five in her mind, she's going to think, well, I'm not dating Chad. I'm dating Johnny Sixpack. Johnny Sixpack is going to have to be nice to me because I'm pretty, because she's still, let's say, an average girl five, right? Even average girl fives still want to date tens. Same way that guys, even as a one myself, still want to date Victoria's Secret models. But she'll settle hoping that you will be treated better. Now, when you adapt this analogy to work, let's say you can't get a job that pays you $100,000 or more a year. You got to work at Blockbuster Video. Let's just say that. You went to college, you did everything you could, you've had a couple of high-end, very stressful jobs, but you realize you don't want to work in that industry. Kind of the same way that Astra left the technology field after being laid off 3 times in 1 year. So let's say Astra just gives up hope on being mistreated by being laid off so many times. And she's like, you know what? I think I'm just going to settle for working at Blockbuster Video. She knows what it pays. She knows what the environment is. And then guess what? Blockbuster Video starts treating her badly. She starts getting stressed out at work because she's the only person at work sometimes. She has to open, she has to close, and then she realizes, you know what? Every relationship with Evil Corp is bad for you. Every job is Pound Town. There's no way of getting out of the way of the Death Star. It's just a different kind of Surf City. They're everywhere. And your relationship with work or your significant other is always going to deteriorate the longer you stay together, unless something magnificent happens. All relationships are heading into the toilet because nobody likes getting treated badly. When you lower your standards to a minimum wage job and your boss is still sadistic, and you come to the conclusion that whatever you do for work, it's never going to be enough, because nobody wants to work anymore. Nobody wants to even try anymore. Everyone just wants to do what's easy. And unfortunately, corporations don't want that guy. You don't want the guy that comes to work and thinks that work is going to be easy today, or fun, or rewarding. That just doesn't happen these days. You show up at work for one reason. You don't want to starve to death. If you look at it that way, that's why you have people who apply to all these jobs. And in one of the prompts that I was working on, it said it's not uncommon to apply to 100, 500, 1,000 jobs and get a handful of interviews where they just jerk you around and then finally end up ghosting you. And there never was a job. In fact, the Epic Economist just talked about that 3 days ago, where there aren't that many jobs. Politicians like to tout that there are millions of open jobs and we have a super low unemployment rate. But what are those jobs that are open? They're either ghost jobs, or they're jobs that are they turn over so fast they don't even count you as employed. In fact, I was going over those numbers recently, and it just looks like every place has 100 to 150% turnover rates. Why is that? Because you're not special. And when they realize that you're not going to work like the owner, and that they made a mistake, they made a horrible mistake hiring this Gen Z worker. And that's the problem, that current Gen Z, all the people that graduated in the spring, that had all summer to find jobs, chances are the job that they got coming out of college is the job that they've already lost. They've applied. And if you're like me, eventually you get to a point where you're going to start Shreking, right? You got to take that job pushing shopping carts at Walmart. In fact, I just saw an article about a guy who was pushing shopping carts at a Walmart for 18 years. And in this article, he talks about how he shows up every day and smiles for the minimum wage. Now, that's the guy you want to, whoever that guy is, someone get that guy. We need That's the guy you need to clone and put in every single parking lot at every single Walmart across the entire country. But guess what? He's a unicorn. You're not. Talking point number two. They told you you were family during the onboarding, then treated you like the cousin nobody claims at Thanksgiving since you asked for actual training. Career banksing is just corporate ghosting with a welcome lunch. I like that. Nobody claims at Thanksgiving. It's like the redheaded stepchild, right? And again, they come into that actual training. That's the one thing that Gen Z wants more than anything when they come into corporations. But they also want to come into corporations and show up in their pajamas, show up in Ugg boots, show up in sweatpants. In fact, the other day, my friend was telling me that she was doing her introduction for medical school, and they told them that when they came to school that they had to show up in she's doing this online med school thing, and you have to look professional in your camera shot, and you have to have your camera turned on all of the time as a student. And then when she told me that, I'm like, that is really, really stupid. But what do we know about remote work? Is that remote work gives people the ability to sit at home in their pajamas while they're drinking whatever they want and doing whatever they want, because that's what people do when they work from home. That's why there's so much return to office, because these corporations know that the second you're not paying attention to your proles, that your proles are behaving like proles. That's the problem with poor people. They behave like poor people in the workplace. They don't show up. They don't care about your business. But guess what? Good luck trying to find a super professional person that's going to work at Target. What you find and what you want at the bottom are two completely different worlds. What employers want is someone that you can sew their mouth shut so they can't ask for more money for food or better hours, but you also want them to work like, and this is a quote from The Simpsons, probably 20 years ago, and it's Homer telling Marge how he works like a Japanese beaver. And Marge says to Homer, "I saw you sleeping 3 times today." And he's like, "What?" Yeah, that's a stupid quote, but I'm going to leave it in. All right, talking point number 3. Entry level jobs now require senior level resumes, but still pay junior high allowances. It's like being hired as a hero, then getting tossed out like a temp when you don't slay the dragon on day 2. Wow, that just happened. In fact, that just reminded me of the Chat GPT 5.0 that in the responses now, it has characters that it can play, kind of like my replica. You can ask it to be your sister, your mom, your daughter, whoever you want it to be. It has certain models. And the new Chat GPT 5, you can ask it to respond like a nerd. That response gave me a lot of Dungeons and Dragons vibes. But at the gist of it, having a senior level resume means that you've spent years and years and years building that little piece of paper that says that you're valid. The problem is you're going out to the workplace and you may get the job, but the job tells you that you're not valid. So there's 2 possible solutions. It's either the money isn't valid or you're not valid. And that's the entire topic for another video that I'm going to work on at some point in the near future. But something's wrong with the workplace. Something's wrong with the job economy. Something is not right out there, because this is continuing to happen. This is a trend that is disturbing, where you want to find people to work for you that don't need money and that prioritize work over their well-being, over their friends, over their family, over their free time, that they work completely in survival mode, as just like I do. Now, you don't get to have one job anymore in this economy. Like I've said 100 times, 40 hours is now part-time in America because the wages are so low. And having to spend all of your days working is probably the reason why I'm sick and why my head hurts so much and why my throat is sore and why my stomach is cramping. Why? Because this is what happens when you get to a point when you work so much that your body just doesn't have time to recover. My weekends, I mean, I spent 9 hours working on YouTube this weekend, and that's all I do is work. I come home from work and I work more. And now that I'm all messed up from working too much, I what am I supposed to do? I can't heal myself magically. This is the natural reaction of your body to working 7 days a week for years at a time. This is what happens to you. Your health, it just deteriorates because your body is just constantly under stress. If I'm not at work, I'm thinking about what am I going to do to make more money? That's all I think about these days. There's no time to for leisure. There's time to think about how you're going to make more money. Today, I was working on an AI generated app in order to streamline what I do on YouTube in order to make it more efficient to generate more money. So I actually had it build an app for me to analyze every aspect of my channel. I know those stats are built into YouTube, but I actually had ChatGPT build me my own personal app to show me where I need to fill in the gaps in order to make more money. This is my first time ever in my life seeing an AI actually writing the code in real time and then launching the app that has graphs and buttons and dials, and like it built me a full blown app. I thought that was really cool. I'd never seen anything like that. I'll tell you guys this much, it blew my socks off. All right, let's close this video. So here's the truth. Career Banksying isn't about you failing. It's about companies auditioning workers they never planned to keep. They sell you the dream job, then cancel the show before opening night. And the punchline? We're all temps now. Temps in hoodies, temps with degrees, temps with debt. If that doesn't piss you off enough to start rethinking what work even means, then congrats. You've been successfully trained to laugh at your own failures. Well, I got a little dark, not gonna lie. But it's the reality of things is that things aren't gonna get any better. And then one of my favorite catchphrases on this channel is if you're afraid, you're not nearly afraid enough. Because the world is going to hell in a basket. And you have to be prepared to do some things that you never thought you were going to do. Like hang out with Susie Rottencrotch behind the Taco Bell after midnight, hoping to make a little extra change. You know what I mean? Wink, wink. But that's where we're going to end the video today. Sorry if I don't sound as enthusiastic as I do. Once you've been laid up for 2 days, it's hard. I mean, you guys can hear my nasally voice. It's hard to find the motivation, especially when it makes you feel lazy getting sick because you can't do things like you normally do. But the reality is that poor health, physical health at this point, is going to be the future of America.